For most of our lives, the story of Adam and Eve has been told as the beginning of everything. Many of you first heard it in Sunday school or from the pulpit, spoken as a simple truth: the garden, the serpent, the fruit, the fall. These words have shaped the way generations have understood where we come from and why we are here. It is a story so familiar that it almost feels untouchable. But let me ask you something. What if Adam and Eve were not the very first humans at all? This question may sound unsettling at first, almost like it challenges the very heart of Scripture. Yet nearly a century ago, Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet, spoke words that invited people to look at Genesis differently. In his trance readings, he described what he called the pre-Adamic beings, souls that existed on earth long before the Garden of Eden. According to him, these early forms were not myths or fables, but stages in the unfolding of spirit into matter. Cayce never dismissed the Bible. He read it every year of his life. He believed its truths ran deeper than literal history. When he spoke of Adam and Eve, he explained that they were not the first human bodies, but the first to hold the fully awakened soul. Adam was not simply molded from dust, but represented the moment when spirit truly entered flesh. This was the birth of a new kind of humanity, not just biological, but spiritual. Seen in this light, the story does not lose meaning. It gains it. Adam and Eve become more than two ancient figures. They become symbols of a choice every soul makes: to remain aligned with the divine or to step into desire, ego, and separation. Their story is our story. It is about awakening to the reality that we are more than bodies. We are souls on a journey. In the minutes ahead, we will explore this truth together, not in a way that denies Scripture, but in a way that honors it. We will walk through Cayce's vision of human origins, discover how it reshapes the meaning of Genesis, and uncover what it might mean for your own life today. The 1,930 seconds were years of hardship in America. The Great Depression left families scraping for food, fathers searching for work that no longer existed, and mothers trying to hold households together with little more than prayer. Newspapers carried headlines of bank failures. Radios, often the only source of news and comfort, spoke of uncertainty. On Sundays, churches were filled with weary people clinging to the familiar story of Adam and Eve, seeking answers for why life could feel so heavy. It was in this climate that Edgar Cayce's voice broke through with words that both shocked and soothed. Imagine a small farming town in Kentucky. A man rises before dawn, walks through fields that no longer yield enough, and wonders if his life has lost meaning. He hears whispers of a man called the Sleeping Prophet, who claims that Adam and Eve were not the first humans. At first, the idea sounds blasphemous, but then he listens more closely. Cayce explains that the soul is ancient, that humanity stretches back long before the garden. For the farmer, this truth plants something new. His life is not just a cycle of toil and failure. He is part of a larger journey, one that gives dignity even to hardship. Far away in Virginia Beach, a family gathers in a modest living room. The father has lost his job, and the children are restless with hunger. They attend a session where Cayce speaks of many lives lived across ages. The mother, once fearful that her children's struggles were meaningless, now feels a strange relief. If their souls had walked before and would walk again, then even this season of suffering had purpose. They leave the gathering not with answers to every problem, but with a sense that their story is bigger than their poverty. Cayce never told people to abandon their Bibles. Instead, he urged them to see Scripture with deeper eyes. Genesis, he said, was not only history, but a mirror of the soul's journey. Adam and Eve symbolized the awakening of the spirit in matter, and every person carried that same choice within them. In a time when the world seemed broken, his words reframed faith. It was not a narrow path of fear, but an expansive journey of hope, stretching across lifetimes, filled with lessons and possibilities. For many, that message became a lifeline in the darkest years. Before the Garden of Eden, before the story most of us grew up hearing, Edgar Cayce described another beginning. He spoke of beings of light, radiant forms that were not yet bound by flesh. They were like sparks shining in a vast universe, free to move, free to create, yet longing to experience the weight and touch of physical life. According to Cayce, these were not myths told to frighten or entertain. They were part of a natural process, the first steps of spirit clothing itself in matter. Picture light taking on shape, the way morning fog thickens into water droplets. At first, the beings were luminous, almost transparent, with more energy than substance. Over time, their forms grew heavier, more defined, until eventually they resembled the early bodies of humankind. Cayce said this was not a fall into sin but a stage of evolution, a necessary journey for souls who wanted to know creation from the inside. It was as though the soul itself chose to put on a garment, one layer at a time, until it felt the earth beneath its feet. For those who listened in the 1,930 seconds, this vision was difficult, yet strangely comforting. Instead of being told that life began with a sudden act of punishment or mistake, they were hearing that humanity was born out of light, carried from higher realms into the physical world. It suggested that our origin is not low or shameful, but divine. We are not accidents. We are travelers who began as brilliance and chose to walk through matter to learn, to love, and to grow. To make sense of this, imagine planting a seed in dark soil. The seed is tiny, but it carries the memory of sunlight. As it grows, it reaches upward toward that light again. In Cayce's telling, the soul is that seed. The beings of light were the first expression, and taking on the body was like entering the soil. The journey was not about forgetting the light, but about carrying it through the weight of physical life until it could shine again. Cayce believed this truth connected both faith and science. Science speaks of evolution, of energy becoming matter, of cells forming into bodies. Faith speaks of spirit, of divine creation. In Cayce's words, they meet in one vision, the soul as light, clothing itself in flesh so that heaven and earth might touch within us. For every listener, this was not just a story of the past. It was a reminder that even today, within our aging bodies and daily struggles, the original light still lives. According to Edgar Cayce, the story of Adam is not about the very first body walking the earth. Long before Adam, forms already existed, shaped slowly from energy into matter. But Adam, in Cayce's vision, represented something new. He was the first being in which spirit and flesh were fully united, the first to carry a living soul aware of itself inside a body. This was not simply biology. It was the birth of self-consciousness, of the soul knowing it was more than clay. Soul embodiment, as Cayce described it, is the moment when the spirit chooses to enter matter with awareness. It is when the eternal and the temporary meet. The body becomes a home not only for breath and blood, but for purpose, memory, and destiny. In this sense, Adam marks a turning point. Humanity did not truly begin when a body first stood upright. It began when the soul said yes to being fully alive in the physical world. For those listening today, especially later in life, this message carries a deep relevance. Every day, we live between two choices: to see ourselves only as bodies, burdened by age, pain, and limitation, or to see ourselves as souls traveling through flesh for a time. Cayce suggested that each decision we make, each thought before sleep, each act of kindness or resentment, is another echo of Adam's choice. Do we live only for matter, or do we live with soul consciousness? This is not just philosophy. It is practical. Think of the small moments at the end of the day. When you carry bitterness into the night, your body feels heavier in the morning. When you choose gratitude, your heart feels lighter. Cayce would say that it is the soul shaping the body, the same law that was set in motion when Adam became the first true soul in flesh. It is not a story frozen in the past. It is the story still unfolding in you. Cayce's message is cosmic in scope, stretching across ages, but also tender in its application. It reminds us that even in the simplest choices, how we speak to others, how we think of ourselves, we continue the same journey begun in Eden. Humanity's true beginning was not dust becoming bone. It was the eternal light stepping into matter and remembering itself. That light still burns in you, waiting to be chosen again, moment by moment. When most of us hear the word Eden, we picture a lush garden, perfect in every detail, where Adam and Eve walked in harmony with their Creator. Yet Edgar Cayce suggested something more subtle and more powerful. He said Eden was not a place on a map, but a state of consciousness, a condition of being in which the soul lived in unity with divine order. It was not the trees or the rivers that mattered most. It was the sense of oneness, the awareness of being whole, at peace, and connected to something greater than the self. In Cayce's interpretation, the fall was not about two individuals eating a piece of forbidden fruit. It was about the soul's universal choice. Every soul, across time, has faced the temptation to leave harmony behind for the lure of ego, desire, or control. The serpent, in this vision, is not an animal but a force of craving, whispering to every heart that life can be lived apart from God. Eve's act symbolizes the soul's first surrender to desire. Adam's act represents the conscious decision to follow. Together, they mirror the human condition, the moment when the spirit chose separation instead of unity. This way of seeing transforms the story. Adam and Eve are not figures trapped in ancient history. They are reflections of us. Each of us has stood in Eden, feeling the pull between harmony and distraction, between love and pride. Every time we choose anger over forgiveness or resentment over compassion, we repeat that same moment. The fall is not a single event lost in the past. It is the daily drama of the human soul. The story of Cain and Abel continues this theme. Cayce explained that there were not only two brothers, but two inner voices. Cain represented the ego-driven self, clinging to control and recognition. Abel symbolized the surrendered spirit, offering what is pure without expectation. The tragedy of Cain killing Abel is not simply about bloodshed in a family. It is the eternal struggle within each of us, the conflict between selfishness and service, between fear and trust. And just as Cain carried a mark, so too do we carry the weight of separation whenever ego wins over spirit. For older adults reflecting on life, this message carries comfort as well as challenge. It tells us that Eden is not lost forever. The garden was never only behind us, it is also ahead of us and within us. Every act of humility, every moment of gratitude, every choice to release bitterness is a step back toward Eden. The path is not grand or unreachable. It is woven into the small decisions of daily life. Think of it this way. When you choose kindness toward a family member instead of sharp words, you step back into the garden. When you decide to forgive a wrong remembered for years, you hear again the echo of Eden's peace. When you look past fear and open your heart to love, you taste the fruit of the tree of life. Eden is not barred by swords of flame. It is waiting for us in the quiet turning of the soul back toward God. Cayce often reminded people that redemption was not a distant dream. It was available now. He said the same law that allowed the fall also allowed the return. Just as what we impress upon the soul shapes the body, what we choose in thought and intention shapes our destiny. The soul may wander, but it always carries the memory of harmony, the pull back to the divine. This is why no life is wasted, and no soul is ever lost. The symbolic meaning of Eden allows faith and life experience to meet. It frees us from debating whether there was a literal garden with literal trees, and instead invites us to ask, how do we live in harmony today? How do we re-enter the state of unity? For Cayce, the answer was not complicated. Pray, meditate, serve others, live with gratitude. These are the gates that reopen Eden within the heart. As we grow older, with the weight of years behind us, this teaching carries special tenderness. It reminds us that we have not fallen too far. No matter how many times we chose ego over spirit, Eden still calls. It whispers in every act of love, in every breath of forgiveness, in every quiet moment when we let go of pride. The story of Genesis becomes not just a memory of loss, but a promise of return. And the path back is open to anyone willing to walk it. One of the most puzzling questions in the book of Genesis has troubled believers for centuries. If Adam and Eve were the first humans, and Cain and Abel were their sons, then where did Cain find his wife? Scripture moves quickly past the detail without explanation, but the question remains. For many, it has been a quiet doubt left unanswered. In the 1,930 seconds, Edgar Cayce addressed this mystery in a way that both startled and comforted his listeners. Cayce explained that Cain did not marry his sister, as some assumed, but one of the beings who already lived outside the Edenic story. These were the pre-Adamic groups, souls that had entered the earth in different forms and through different channels long before Adam and Eve. In his readings, he described entire civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, and the children of Mu, carrying the experiences of spirit merging with matter in diverse ways. According to Cayce, the earth was already full of life when Adam appeared. What made Adam unique was not the body itself, but the awakened soul consciousness that he carried. For listeners raised on the strict literalism of Sunday sermons, this was shocking. To hear that others walked the earth before Adam and Eve challenged everything they had been taught. Yet Cayce's tone was never one of destruction. He did not mock or dismiss the Bible. Instead, he invited people to see that Scripture held more than one layer. The literal story might not explain every detail, but the symbolic and spiritual levels offered a depth that could reconcile these mysteries. Think of how it felt for a churchgoer in Virginia in the 1930 seconds, sitting in a modest gathering, worried about unemployment and hunger, and then hearing that humanity's story stretched back through forgotten ages. The surprise could easily have become fear, yet many described feeling relief. If there were other groups beyond Eden, then the gaps in Genesis were not contradictions. They were windows into a grander truth. The Bible was not smaller than they had thought. It was larger. Cayce's mention of Atlantis and Lemuria added to this sense of wonder. He described civilizations of great knowledge that rose and fell long before Adam. Their traces, he said, could still be found under the sands of Egypt and beneath the waters of the Atlantic. To his followers, this was not fantasy but revelation. It linked the sacred text of Genesis with the great mysteries of human history, binding spiritual tradition with the unexplained ruins and legends scattered across the earth. By presenting Cain's wife as a member of these other groups, Cayce did more than solve a riddle. He reframed how people read the Bible. The story was not a closed box that collapsed under questions. It was a layered text, alive with meaning. The literal gave structure, but the symbolic revealed the soul's journey, and the spiritual dimension showed the eternal purpose. For the faithful in the 1930 seconds, this interpretation allowed them to hold on to their belief while also embracing new possibilities. Cayce always emphasized that his revelations were not meant to tear down. He was a devout Christian himself, reading Scripture daily. His goal was to expand understanding, to show that faith could survive questions, and that truth had room for both tradition and mystery. To him, Cain's wife was not a problem to explain away, but a doorway into the vast history of the soul. In that moment, the Bible was not reduced. It was magnified, shining with new light for those willing to see. During the Great Depression, when breadlines stretched down city blocks and families sold heirlooms just to buy coal for the winter, Edgar Cayce's voice carried a message unlike any other. While the world spoke of scarcity and loss, he reminded people that their lives were part of something vast and eternal. He told them that their souls had lived before, had endured other ages, and would continue beyond the hardships of that moment. For men and women who felt reduced to numbers in an unemployment line, these words were like a lantern in the dark. They were not forgotten or powerless. They were ancient travelers, carrying within them the memory of light. As war clouds gathered in the 1940 seconds, this message became even more precious. Letters poured into Cayce's office from families with sons on distant battlefields. Mothers asked if their prayers mattered. Widows begged to know if their husbands still lived in spirit. Cayce's answers offered more than comfort. He reminded them that the soul never ends, that even in the chaos of bombs and battlefields, their loved ones were part of a story older than any war. To hear that humanity's origins stretched back before Adam and Eve, and forward into futures not yet written, gave them courage to keep going. One veteran told of how, after the war, he struggled with nightmares and despair. He felt broken, as if his life had ended even though his body had survived. Then he read Cayce's words, that each soul carries the lessons of many lifetimes, and that even suffering can be woven into a larger purpose. Slowly, the nightmares eased. He began to see himself not as a ruined man, but as a soul continuing a journey. That shift gave him the strength to rebuild his life and to tell his children that they, too, were more than the trials they faced. Fast forward to today, and the questions are different, but the longing is the same. People over 55 often find themselves searching for meaning beyond the roles that once defined them. Retirement leaves space once filled by work. Illness and loss remind them that the body is fragile. They may ask quietly in the night, "Have I done enough? What comes next?" It is in these moments that Cayce's message still resonates. He would say that no matter the stage of life, the soul is never finished. Each day, each choice, is part of a vast journey that began long before this lifetime and continues into eternity. For someone who feels small in the face of age or grief, these words are a reminder of dignity. To know that we are ancient souls, carrying wisdom across centuries, changes the way we see ourselves. Retirement is not an ending, but a doorway to deeper reflection. Illness is not only a decline, but an invitation to remember that we are more than flesh. Loss is not separation, but a reminder that bonds of spirit endure. Cayce's words live on because they answer the questions that echo through every generation. In the 1,930 seconds, they helped farmers and workers survive despair. In the 1,940 seconds, they comforted families torn by war. And today, they remind older adults that life is not measured only in years, but in the growth of the soul. We are not small. We are not finished. We are threads in a tapestry woven across ages, each choice of love, forgiveness, and service drawing us closer to the Eden within. Edgar Cayce often said that the way back to Eden was not through grand gestures or impossible tasks, but through simple daily choices. He believed prayer, meditation, and service were the three keys that unlocked the soul's memory of harmony with God. For older adults, these are not distant ideals. They are gentle practices that can be woven into ordinary days, even in the quiet of later years. The path is not about perfection. It is about consistency, about choosing small steps that open the heart and soften the grip of ego. The first practice is 3 minutes of silence at night. Before sleep, when the house grows quiet and the world feels still, take 3 minutes to let go. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and breathe slowly. Imagine the weight of the day sliding off your shoulders. In those minutes, you are not a worker, a parent, or a patient. You are a soul resting in the presence of the divine. Cayce believed that even this short silence helped the subconscious align with peace, planting seeds that would bloom by morning. Over time, this nightly pause becomes a return to Eden, where the soul remembers its true home. The second practice is writing one line of gratitude each morning. Keep a small notebook by the bed or on the kitchen table. When you wake, before the worries of the day press in, write down one thing you are thankful for. It might be as simple as the sound of birds outside the window or the comfort of a warm cup of tea. Gratitude, Cayce taught, lifts the soul out of fear and bitterness. It opens the heart to light. One line may not seem like much, but like drops of water carving stone, it reshapes the spirit day by day. For those who carry regrets or losses, this practice reminds them that life still holds beauty and meaning. The third practice is one small act of service each day. Service does not have to mean a great sacrifice. It can be as simple as calling a friend, offering a smile to a neighbor, or speaking a kind word to a stranger. For someone who feels limited by age or illness, these acts are still powerful. Cayce believed service was the way the soul mirrored divine love in the world. Each act of kindness is like planting a seed of Eden in the soil of daily life. Over time, those seeds grow into a garden that blesses not only others, but also the one who planted them. Together, these three practices, silence, gratitude, and service, form a gentle rhythm. They are not burdens to carry, but gifts to receive. 3 minutes at night, one line in the morning, one act during the day. Simple enough for anyone, steady enough to change the atmosphere of a life. And when practiced with sincerity, they help the soul release the grip of ego and remember its deeper nature. For those in later years, these steps carry special power. They remind us that the spiritual journey does not end with retirement or decline. It continues, perhaps even grows stronger, as the distractions of earlier life fall away. Each day still holds meaning. Each choice still echoes in eternity. Cayce's wisdom assures us that no matter our age, the way back to Eden is open. It begins not with grand effort, but with a quiet pause, a grateful word, and a loving act. Edgar Cayce's vision asks us to see the story of Adam and Eve in a new light. They were not the first humans, but the first souls fully awakened in the flesh. Their story is not only about a garden long ago, but about the awakening each of us continues to live. The fall was not a single act in history. It is the moment we all face when we choose between ego and spirit, fear and trust, separation and love. This means the story of Genesis is not finished. It is still unfolding in you. Every choice to forgive, every moment of gratitude, every act of kindness is another step back toward the Eden within. You do not need to search for a hidden garden. It is already carried in your soul, waiting to be remembered. Even struggles, regrets, and losses become part of that journey, shaping the path of return. So when you look at your life today, see it not as small or ordinary, but as a sacred continuation of a story that began before time. You are not alone. You are part of humanity's eternal walk, back to harmony with the divine. As we close, I offer you a gentle blessing. May your nights bring peace, your mornings bring hope, and your days bring love that grows deeper with each choice. If this message has touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to join this community of seekers, and pass this video to someone who longs for hope. Together, we can remember that Eden is not lost. It is alive in the choices we make today.